Testing, 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 testing. La 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 la. Hello. Are we ready? Can anybody hear me? Can you hear me? Should I turn it louder? I don't want to scream in a microphone. Can we turn it a little louder? Can you guys get your seats, please? No one can hear me. Hey, can you guys get your seats, please? You don't have to listen to me. That's cool. I don't care. I'm drinking. All right. Yay, that sounds better. Okay. Is everyone out from the front? Is everyone filing in? Looks like it. All right. So we're going to get started. We're running a little bit late, but I know traffic was terrible. Thank you all for coming. For those of you who are not familiar with this space, we are TechSoup Global. TechSoup is a nonprofit. As you can see by the wall behind you, we were founded in 1987, originally called Compumentor. What we do is we help other nonprofits with their technology. We do that through a number of different programs. We have a whole handful of programs, and we are in 90 countries. But our main primary program is a product distribution channel. So big vendors like Microsoft, Cisco, Symantec, Adobe, and Intuit, and hundreds of others donate their products to us, and we pass those donations on to nonprofits that we validate as real 501c3 nonprofits. And those nonprofits get all of those products at 5% of retail, so 95% off of retail. And that social enterprise funds the rest of the organization. We have a lot of education campaigns. We have community department, and I am with the newest division of TechSoup, which is called Caravan Studios. And I have been at TechSoup since 2000. And I launched all the community stuff here, and I launched this group probably at TechSoup probably, I don't know, 7 years ago. But Caravan Studios builds apps for nonprofits. One of our apps is strategically placed behind the speaker so you can't see it, and it's called Safe Night. And we are basically building apps for social benefit. The way we're doing that is we're talking to groups of nonprofits. So we're not building apps for specific individual nonprofits. We're building apps for causes. So Safe Night, which is in all marketplaces right now, is an app to help crowdfund hotel rooms when there are no available shelter beds for victims of domestic violence. This was a problem that we discovered by speaking to many domestic violence organizations, and that they run out of shelter beds. So we built this crowdfunding app called Safe Night. You can put it on your phone and help an anonymous person who needs a hotel get a hotel for the night. Next app that we have in the marketplace is called Range, and Range is currently in the marketplace it's in all marketplaces, actually. And what Range does is Range will help you locate a free meal for youth right now where you are at. So it works like Yelp. It looks like Yelp, but it is for the summer lunches program. Because in the summer months, 1 in 6 kids goes hungry because they rely on the school lunches program to eat. So, kids are year-round. Kids exist in the summer months as well. And so, and the summer lunch program doesn't do a very good job of marketing itself often. So we built this app. We're working with the FDA and a few other organizations, No Kid Hungry and No Hunger, all these different organizations, and the app is called Range. The third app we are building, that app is basically it's not geared at the kids, it's geared for anyone who gets asked the question, where can I find a free meal right now? So that's like bus drivers and doctors and teachers and after school program people and clergy, librarians. That's who that app's for. The third app is called 4 Bells. And 4 Bells is right now in the Windows marketplace, soon to be in the other 2. And what 4 Bells does is 4 Bells helps organizations deploy known volunteers for time-sensitive urgent tasks. So what that means is, let's say you're a pet rescue org and you need somebody to pick up a dog from the kill shelter and take it to a foster home, and you see the person is already a volunteer at your organization. it geolocates you if you're in the service, and it will say, hey, can you do this gig right now? And you claim the gig. So it works in the way that Lyft does, for example, or Uber, where the actual volunteer can claim the gig. And that app is also, it's being piloted with emergency response groups, so disaster response. So if anybody has any connections in the disaster emergency response world, please find me, because I would love to talk to you about the app and pick your brain about the app. Like if anybody knows people at the Red Cross or FEMA or those kind of organizations, great. Sorry. So what I'm doing with Caravan is I'm doing community and partnerships. Today, we are here with our online community tribe. OCTribe is the hashtag. If you tweet using OCTribe, your tweets will show up right here. There's me looking at, I don't know what that is. What am I holding? No, that's not a margarita. What is that thing? Oh, that's that silver shaker. Okay, anyway, if you use it's my phone. That's trying to take a selfie, that's right. Looks like my shirt's all puffed out. Anyway, if you use the hashtag OCTribe, your tweet will show up there. So please use it. We have a live stream today. We have people watching. The URL will be tweeted out, and I guess Zachary's probably already done that. It's also on the Facebook page and on the Meetup page. Someone named, not TARP, but something like that, brought Lyft coupons. How do I pronounce your name? Todd. Oh, that's right. You spell it weird. That's right. I just saw the TA, right? It's TAHD, but it's Todd. And so he, I remember TA. Sorry, it was a 4-letter name with TA at the beginning. Todd brought some Lyft coupons. So if you guys are using or interested in using Lyft for new customers, there's also that code I sent around earlier. Wanted to thank Valerie for being our tequila sponsor from Pura Vida. And why don't you come up and say a little bit about the tequila? And she's going to tell you the Twitter handle so you guys can tweet about it.
Hi, everyone. I'm with Pura Vida Tequila, and we are a newer tequila company, so I'm glad to see that there's so many of you here to try our product. Our Twitter handle is hashtag Pura Vida Tequila. Okay, I actually don't tweet, so... Okay, I'm going to learn, so the next time this happens, I'll know what...
It's tequila Pura Vida.
Oh, okay, thank you. Oops. So I just like to set up and, share with people. So, I hope you guys, everyone that wanted to try it, had an opportunity to do that. We also have 2 kinds back there. We have our silver and we have our reposado. So we are out of margaritas, but you can just sample that if you'd like. So, yes, just knock it back. All right, thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for doing this. And you guys tweet all about Tequila Pura Vida so that people can know about it. Thank you, Farouk, for being our tech guy. And I want to thank the volunteers, because without the volunteers, none of this could happen. So would my lovely family of volunteers please wave or stand? Mark, you can wave too. There we are. Yay! Thank you, guys. And Ravi at the door and Mia at the door. And their Twitter handles are usually written up here, but they're not right now. But that's okay. We didn't do it. But you'll see them tweeting. Does anybody have a job announcement? No? Louis does. Louis is the new community manager at TechSoup. Give him a round of applause.
So TechSoup has just posted a copy editor position. It's to join the global media team that I'm on. So if you know people who like to edit, no writing, we've been told. So check it out.
That's weird. That doesn't sound like fun. I guess it's fun for some people, not me. Who's looking for work here? Okay, cool. You see all those smart people? Who's looking just for gigs? Odd gig here and there? Me too, sometimes. Okay. What else do we need to say? Have we forgotten anything? We thanked Tequila Pura Vida. Our volunteers are all tweeting. You can see their Twitter handles, hashtag OCTribe. We're about to have this wonderful presentation. I think we're all, everything else is caught up. If anyone has more job announcements at the end, you guys can let me know, or you can just mingle and schmooze. Thank you. And so without further ado, we will be introducing, I'm happy to announce that Caty Kobe from OpenTable, the community manager at OpenTable, is presenting to us today, and she's really smart and a great community manager. And in terms of questions, would you rather be interrupted or have them held to the end?
Let's just see how it goes.
If it becomes too overwhelming and you guys are interrupting her, I'll just jump in the middle and moderate.
Yeah. If you guys are interrupting me, then I'm not sure if that means I'm doing good or bad. But anyway, thank you, Susan, so much. Hi, I'm Caty Kobe. Nice to meet you guys, and nice to see some friendly faces that I have seen before at these meetups. I'm super excited to be here tonight. When I first started doing community, the OCTribe, and all of the live person events that they put on, all the tweet streams, like blogging, all of that stuff really helped me to learn a lot about what it is that I should be doing, or I should not be doing for that matter. And so it's just really nice to be able to be here and kind of share the love, spread the knowledge, all that good stuff. So what am I talking about today? I'm talking about community and customer service and that sort of like intersection that is, sometimes works really, really well and sometimes doesn't work really, really well. I have a really long background in customer service, and in fact, there's not a single job that I've had in my entire life that hasn't been customer facing in some way or another. So everything from, being a receptionist for my dad's doctor's office to being a pizza girl, all the way up through working at Apple and then being a community manager. I just talk to people a lot for a living, and it's kind of nice. So one of the things that I really want to talk about today while we're talking is just sort of how the disciplines between community and support overlap, and how our teams can work better with one another, ultimately for the good of all of our users and customers. So to kick things off, I just want to bring up, I've spoken with a lot of community managers over the years who just in general sometimes feel a little bit frustrated around how much customer support may be involved with their jobs. And really, like, I sort of define customer support, I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but looking at things that are much more of like a transactional nature, like I need help with this is broken, you fixed it, great, we're good and moving on. And so ultimately, the frustration around this, it really just ties back to a lack of clarity and a lack of understanding around what you're supposed to be doing as a community manager. And there's been conversations about this for the last several years, but most recently I saw in a blog post that Maria Ogneva published last week related to the fact that because there really isn't a universally accepted definition of the practice of online community management, it makes it really easy for things that might not be directly related to what we're doing just to kind of like filter their way in. But that said, even though we don't have a broadly accepted definition, we're probably not going to have a broadly accepted definition for a while. And thinking about this earlier, I did a little bit of research. And, the example I hear a lot is when people talk about marketing, everyone knows what a marketer is and what marketers do. And, well, that's because the practice of marketing has actually been around since the late 1800s, early 1900s. So marketers have had a good century or more to really hone in on what it is they do and what it is that is expected of the profession. And moving on down the line, brand managers, product managers, even human resources professionals, they started to emerge in like the 1930s, so they themselves have about 80 years or so. Computer engineering and computer science really started to come about in the 50s and the 60s, but because it is a practice that you're making something, you're building hardware, you're building software, that was really helpful in being able to mature that industry and advance the sort of definition and knowledge around what they do much more quickly. Communities, online communities, as we all know, have been around since like the late 80s, but really as a profession have only started to take root in the last 15 or so years, and not until sort of like the mid, do we call it the 2000s, that last decade we just finished? Until that period of time between like 2004 and 2008 when we started to see websites and web technologies evolving to bring in more communication between customers and more communication between users, and the rise of social media, that's when we started to see more and more community managers emerge as a profession. So that said, it might take a while for us to get there. I think that with all the technology in place, it will be a lot faster than 100 years. But we should just recognize that you know, a lot of the definition isn't universally accepted everywhere, and so we all as community managers have a responsibility to educate the companies that we're working for and that we're working with to help kind of advance the practice of what we're doing further. So because there's no definition, companies can make it up sometimes, a lot of times, all the time, in fact. And they do it in the form of job descriptions. You go out and look at a job description for a community manager, and company A will have a completely different job description of what they're looking for than company B. And that makes it kind of difficult for you and your experience when we're trying to apply and move forward. But you know, really at the heart of it, true communities are built around people and not necessarily around a technology platform. Especially as of late, a lot of brands have been convinced that you need to purchase some sort of technology platform to build the community on. And since they're spending a lot of money on these platforms, they immediately demand ROI. And because there's that demand for showing how my money is paying off, it can kind of put community in a box a little bit and sometimes force it to be something that it may or may not actually be. I believe communities are groups of like-minded people who share values, behaviors, and shared artifacts. And naturally, customers and users of a particular product or service can form a really, really strong community. So because of that, community and customer support, it's a really, really easy sell. Community professionals and support reps, we're similar, right? We love making people happy. We're all really, really smart, and we're really good at communication for the most part. Additionally, there's this promise of, you know, peer-to-peer interaction that could potentially help you, you know, reduce support costs or deflect inbound tickets that really piques a lot of executives' interest. And on top of that, any existing answers or product-related content that you'll see in the community that could get surfaced in search results can also result in cost savings. So that's sort of how it becomes justified that community and support should be combined and be one and the same. So it all sounds good, but in actuality, our roles are really different, and especially for people who have been doing community management for a long time or doing customer support for a really long time, the difference becomes really, really noticeable. And so in this diagram I put together, on the, let's see here, left side in the blue, we have community, and on the right side, sort of in the yellowy orange color, we have more qualities of what customer support looks like or what it might sound like to a lot of people. So for instance, there is overlap, and there's a lot of overlap. Both roles are incredibly user-centric, and I would even advocate that, you know, the primary goal of being a community manager is being the advocate for your user internally. So this really strong sense of user-centricity bleeds across the lines. Additionally, we love to make people happy. Did you guys remember that part? We love to hear people say thank you and make people's day and surprise and delight and send you great things in the mail. So that's also a pretty big thing. I've never met a customer support rep that doesn't like making people happy. So, and then finally, we both engage in conversations that are, we're acting on behalf of the company, talking directly to our users. And so that's another sort of common thing. But some of the differences that we have, are pretty stark. And one of the biggest one relates to the types of conversations that are being facilitated between the two practices. For instance, customer support is very reliant on transactional conversations. I mean, people are measured on it, right? What's the time to close? What's the time to resolution? What's the time to first response? In fact, when cases come back and forth and keep getting reopened, you don't really like that because it's driving your numbers up, and that's not a good thing. Whereas community is more of a place for these ongoing discussions. And these discussions, I've seen discussion threads that will go on for days, weeks, months, even years. They'll get picked up, and new members will breathe new life into them. So that's kind of a pretty stark difference. Another difference that I see between community and support is that the conversations for support representatives are almost always reactive, and they're always product focused. Again, there's a lot of really strong measurement and really strong ties being put around what the customer support representatives are responsible for. So the conversations that you have are very much directed towards this is broken and this is how you do it, and that sort of thing. Community, on the other hand, gives you the option to be really proactive and also publish content that is not only super supportive and super proactive, but really collaborative. It gives the opportunity for community members to share best practices with one another about how they're using their product, or even something related to just the industry that your company works in. I think the Fitbit community is actually a wonderful example of this. If you're a Fitbit member, their community, they have a section that's sort of dedicated to the product specific stuff, but then they have an entire section dedicated to lifestyle and wellness, and there are discussions around how to get more sleep and what your different healthy recipes are and good ways to work out when you're in the office all day and that sort of thing. You don't see support reps having those conversations with those customers. And then finally, community really, it exists everywhere. It doesn't have to be just focused onto one channel or one particular technology or one particular platform. Anyone who talks about your company or your brand, whether they're an employee, a customer, a prospective customer, an industry analyst, they're technically part of your community, right? Because communities they're just people everywhere. Whereas customer support is very, very often defined to specific channels, right? We want you to contact us through these specific ways, and there's a reason for it. It's not because we want to make your life harder or anything, but it's because we need to track and measure and make sure that you're in line with everyone else, and that we're getting to people and resolving questions quickly. So there's a lot of differences between the two, and you can imagine sort of as a community manager, if you get hired on, and there's a title that I've had actually for a while called community support manager, which is quite conflicting because you're literally doing both of these things at the same time and you're feeling a little bit schizophrenic. And so yeah, that's the differences between the two, and I want to talk a little bit more about how, if you're in the position of having to do both or needing to do both, how you can kind of help manage yourself and manage what you're doing. So the big thing is, if you found yourself in a position like that, or maybe you're interviewing for a position where it seems like there's a lot of support-related tasks folded in under the title of community manager or user advocate or that sort of thing, you do owe it to yourself to take the time to clarify the differences between what the expectations are and reset your own expectations about what you can expect from the particular role. Literally write them out. Do a Venn diagram, do a pro and con list. I always, when I start a job, I copy and paste the job description and save it in my Google Docs so that if something doesn't feel quite right later down the line, I can go back in and double check and see, wait a second, was this something that I'm actually supposed to be doing, or is this something that's kind of gotten, creeped in somehow? So do your comparing and contrasting. You really want to center and get clear on what it means for you as a community manager and whether or not you're in alignment with what your company's needs are. Again, because the companies right now are driving the definition of what community is, just because if your definitions don't align, you do need to have a conversation about it. It doesn't mean that you need to go immediately find a new job or whatever, but it's worth having a good conversation with your boss about, I was hired to do this. This is sort of where my expectations are. I'm finding myself doing a lot of this. How can we meet in the middle? That sort of thing. If you work too long in a role where the job description doesn't align with what you want to be doing or what you believe in, it can just be incredibly frustrating. You wake up in the morning and you don't want to go to work. And so you really do owe it to yourself to do this little exercise and refocus on, is this really what I should be doing? Is it really what I want to be doing? And long term, is this really what's going to help me advance my career? So getting clear on all that stuff feels really, really good for a lot of different reasons. Once you have those conversations and understand what it is that you're supposed to be talking about, what it is you're supposed to be doing, you can develop a really strong plan for the future. And you can plan on how to grow your community. You can plan about all the great things you're going to be doing with your community. You can plan all the fantastic ways that your users can provide more of their input and how you can get the company to pay more attention to your users. It's easier to focus on goals when you have clarity, because when you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, you can say, okay, well, this is what my goal is, and it maps to what I'm supposed to be doing here, so it takes priority over everything else. And that's really nice because, if you work, all of us work in really fast-paced environments, but I think startups are especially fast-paced, and your goals and priorities, they can shift every week or every quarter. And so this just helps you really kind of like reset and be able to say, like, despite all of the change and the hecticness that's going on, here's what I'm going to focus on. Let's see here. You also, when you have a lot of this clarity, you can figure out what your true impact is of the community and what it is that you want it to be. So when we talk about communities and what we want from them, like if the ultimate goal of this community that you've chosen to manage and that you're, aligned with is to like reduce support costs, you can better narrow in on the things that will help reduce those costs or, provide a better service and really be able to better demonstrate that impact to your boss and to everyone else in the company for that matter. I think on the flip side, Sephora is a community I love that has done a great job of actually being able to measure how much money each individual community member has spent with them. So they have some like really cool reporting technologies on the back end, but their beauty talk community is fantastic. It's all about beauty products, as you can imagine, and they've actually been able to track, how those conversations correlate back to like the dollar amount spent. So, getting clear on those goals can help you do that. And then finally, it'll just help you propel your career. Decide what you want to be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And if you set the foundation right now around what it is you want to be doing and what experience you want to get, it will help push you in that direction. The opposite of being clear on things is, just having things be very obscure and very vague, and that sucks to feel that way. Nothing bad will happen if you don't take the time to figure out exactly like what your needs are and what your company's needs are. But if you don't have clarity about what your role is at some point, you're probably going to end up hating it. Just being honest. And the reason why this like lack of clarity is just miserable is because it doesn't scale, right? So if you work for like a 10-person startup, you're the only community manager, you're probably doing a ton of different things, not just customer support, but a whole bunch of other stuff too. What happens when your app goes viral? And all of a sudden you have more users than you could ever imagine and have no idea what you're gonna do. If you don't have everything all in order and documented and figured out exactly what you want from your community, how can you think about going and bringing on 3, 5, 10, however many community managers that you need to grow your team? Like, it's a terrifying thought to think about, actually. It also just, again, it doesn't promote job satisfaction. If you don't know what you're doing, one of the first communities I managed was an HR community, so there's something about like employee engagement and job satisfaction that really resonates with me, and I care a lot about liking what I do for a living, and I think you all do too. So yeah, if you don't know what you're doing every day, it's been shown to be a leading indicator for people who have just like have completely checked out of their jobs or have even gone to get new jobs in general. And then finally, not having this lack of clarity doesn't really help to move us forward as an industry either. And I keep going back to that point because what we're doing is in the history of the world so new, right? I mean, it might feel like we've been saying the same things for the last several years or, we've been doing it for a really long time, but when you compare it to the work that like marketers or HR professionals or engineers or even sales professionals for that matter, I mean, sales has been around literally since the beginning of time. We haven't been doing this very, very long. So when you don't know what you're doing and then you apply for other roles and then that ends up, muddling up what you thought and what you believe in as well, it doesn't work out well for the rest of us. We all kind of have to work together to be able to, like, as one voice, come together and say what we want to be doing for our profession and why. All right, let me look through my notes. Let's see if I missed anything. Yeah. Oh, and if you haven't read Maria's article from last week, I would highly recommend it. It was on CMS Wire. It has to do with, it was called something like, are we measuring the value of online business communities wrong? And she just had a really great argument around how like the lack of clarity, it makes it really, really hard for us to get budget and do things that we want. So definitely recommend Googling that one. All right, so let's talk about customer support. I truly believe that providing good service to everyone is everyone's job in the company, regardless of if you're the office assistant to the CEO. It's every single person's job to provide a good service. But giving actual like technical product support and troubleshooting is not everybody's job. And there's actually really specific skills required that it shouldn't be everybody's job. I work with a product now, actually. I come from a SaaS-based software world, and one of our products now is an actual application we install on a server or client in the restaurant, and I would have no way to troubleshoot that if I tried. Really, it's just so kind of beyond me and my technical capability and skill set. So the hard stuff you really want to leave to the people who are trained to do it, because not only will they take care of it faster, they can do it in a way and better reset customers' expectations. So customer support representatives, I think, are an incredible profession, an incredible group of people. They're super skilled, and they have a really, really, really tough job having to answer all the hard questions while keeping, someone calm on the other end of the line as well. Not everyone can replicate that, and not everyone should try. The things, though, that will make your life easier when you're working with your customer support team are these. And the biggest one is actually understanding your product. You don't have to know the answer to everything whatsoever, but you should absolutely have a baseline understanding of how your product works and how it behaves, so that you can make accurate judgment calls if necessary. So for instance, if you are working on a platform that is a SaaS-based application, and on a Sunday you start seeing a whole bunch of tweets or getting a whole bunch of emails that something is down, you should at least have the baseline knowledge of how it works to be able to tell, okay, does this mean that everything is down, or is it just maybe there's one particular instance going on? Having just that baseline level of knowledge will really help save you, and it will also help the customer support team feel like you're on their side a little bit, and you're not just always shoving every little thing to them, showing that you've got a little bit of, cred, I guess. The next thing that will really, really help is correctly understanding what your escalation paths look like and what the different procedures are. You really want these to be clearly documented. If anything, just for that whole scalability question, if you have to all of a sudden hire 10 people, then there's the information right there for them. But certain issues will go to certain people at certain times. If it's on a weekend, you may have a specific set of people to reach out to versus the people that you reach out to during your normal day-to-day. And it's just really, really helpful to know this, to understand this, and understand the reasons for why you would use these different escalation procedures and policies throughout the weeks and the weekends and the scope of your work. Just another reason that will show your support team that, again, you can handle things yourself and that you know who to reach out to, that you're not waking up the wrong people on a Saturday morning when something is down, because that's happened. Let's see here. It's also really, really important to understand and recognize the volume that your support team is dealing with. And partly because you just want to be a good team player. If you know that there's a major issue going on and everyone's super underwater, you don't want to be that person that walks up and is like, you haven't responded to my email yet, what do I tell this customer? You don't want that at all. It's the worst way to build rapport. And so if you can understand and recognize the volume, it makes it easier for you to set expectations with customers when you have to deal with them in your day-to-day work. So again, continuing on with this outage example, if you know that there's an outage and you know that the phones are ringing off the hook and that your support team can't get any rest, the next time people send 3 tweets or 3 private messages in the community to you complaining that something is down, you can just take that information and say, yeah, we know, we're working on it. Our team is really, really busy right now. Let me take your contact information and I'll make sure that someone can reach back out to you as necessary. Also, when you're doing that, get all the relevant details, and that'll also win some brownie points as well. You've got to be able to work well with your team. If you're doing any sort of community support related stuff, you just have to. You need to understand their workflow. You need to understand their priorities. And as much as I hate to say it, you kind of have to work your own needs around theirs to be able to build up a lot of trust and rapport to be able to get some favors down the line. One tip I have related to that is you can always, if you have a particular customer or user who's super, super angry, you can always submit a case on behalf of them, right? You can't troubleshoot the issue, but you can definitely say, I am so, so sorry, let me submit a case for you, take all the information for them, and just cut out that middleman step, which makes them a lot happier. And then also your support team, they can talk to you if they have any questions and move on with fixing things. And then finally, the thing that will help make your life easier is if you can do a really good job of preventing scope creep on what your job is supposed to be. And this goes back to my earlier points about understanding your job description and whether or not it aligns with what your company actually needs and what they want you to do. Because once you can understand whether or not something falls in your wheelhouse, it makes it really easy for you to say no if you need to. And you don't want to, again, become the person that says, I'm sorry, that's not my job. Like, go talk to someone else. But if it's something that really doesn't make sense, or if it's a really big project that is going to take a lot of time away from what you're doing, you just need to have the baseline understanding to be able to build a valid case as to why you can't take it on. So a great example of this would be being a community manager and then being asked to build up a training program, for instance. Training isn't typically a community manager's number one skill set, but when you work in support, it can creep up. Whether you need to put together some self-service training programs for customers or what have you. So if you understand what you're supposed to be doing and what your goals are, when you get asked to do really big projects like that, you can say, actually, this isn't really aligning. Let me help you figure out, what the right solution is and what the best solution is to be able to help us move forward. Yeah, definitely don't become the it's not my job person, though. It's not good. Let's see, where are we at? How are the tweets? Oh, thank you for tweeting the article. That was really, really good. All right. So my next point is that you can, though, be a support community manager without being the support manager. And it's really important to understand that those two things are different and separate. The term support community, though, is really inherently tricky because it's literally combining the two in the same name. And so, though your community and your online support functions might use the same technologies and the same channels, like you can use forums for support, you can use online chat for support and community building, you can use all of the same tools for different purposes, they're definitely not one and the same. So if you are focused on building a true support community, then your job as a community manager isn't answering every single question. Your job as a community manager is really going to be focusing on two things. One, making sure people get the answers to their question. So funneling the right information to the right people, both internally and externally. And then two, really working to develop those relationships with your sort of champions or power users to leverage peer-to-peer. If you have a community that's kind of just full of a customer coming in and posting a complaint and an employee somewhere responding to it, it's sort of not a community, right? It's very transactional, and communities are more about experiences and conversations and relationships. So what you as a community manager can be doing is developing those relationships with your power users. A great example of a company that does this is a smaller telecom in Canada called Kudo Mobile, and they have a really strong, we called it champions, but advocates program, and their top level advocates are called their mobile masters. And these mobile masters respond to over 90% of the things that come into the community. And it's really because they want to, and then they also have a lot of other kind of prizes and things that make people want to be a mobile master. But, customers will come in and say, I just got this phone, I don't know how to work this feature. I mean, you can imagine how many cell phones there are out there. You as a community manager cannot be expected to know every single thing. But by developing really strong relationships with the mobile masters and developing a really strong program that works for them and helps them to feel like they're getting a lot out of it, you can do some really, really, really great things, like get 90% of your questions answered for you. And then, yes, making sure that you do route the correct questions to the correct community members or employees who can answer them. Excuse me. That was a lot harder than it needed to be, sorry. How you can make your support communities thrive. So, again, just because it is more of a support-oriented conversation that you're having doesn't mean it needs to be all negative and doesn't mean it needs to be all just kind of sad Eeyore all the time with a rain cloud over your head. That doesn't need to be it at all. You can really, really, really make these things shine and thrive. And so one way to do that is to invite other departments to participate. Support communities are all about your product. customers love talking to product managers. So if you can get a product manager to come in and, I don't know, maybe do like a weekly Q&A with them or some sort of a webcast, something that like gives your community managers or community members a little bit more insight into what the product team is doing and where they're going with it, is great. This year, the State of the Community Management report from the Community Roundtable showed that executive participation in a community, so like VP and C levels, drove customer participation by like 2 to 3 times as much as communities without any executive participation. That's huge, right? So if you can get your customer success, customer support leaders in there participating, if you can get your technology or product leaders in there participating, if you're really awesome and you can get your CEO participating, that's fantastic too. But customers, they love having that extra connection to the company. And I think sometimes, at least with your regular community members, that they'll see you and they get used to you and then they're like, oh yeah, that's Katie over there. Oh, but when, Karen or someone else comes in to respond to me, like that's a big deal because I know that they're someone different and that they are doing different things in the organization. Again, focus on activating your champions and your user advocates because the way to make support communities really work for you is to center them around peer-to-peer. And so you want to get your users having conversations with one another and helping one another. There was a picture that I forgot to put in here. I found on the Salesforce community, this guy asked, "Why are you guys so helpful?" or something like that, right? And this community member wrote back and was like, because I like to be. I think it's fun. And he wrote this big old paragraph about like how cool he thought it was to be able to come in and like help out other people with the same questions. And I was like, yes, that just makes my little community manager heart so happy to hear that. So if you can focus on activating more people like that in their community, it's beneficial for you, obviously, but it's also beneficial for them because they really like it. And they wouldn't do it if they didn't like it, trust me. They'll write you back and say, hey, please don't reach out to me anymore. I don't want to do this. So give them attention, nurture the relationships, grow the relationships, get really creative about rewarding and recognizing these members of your community because it'll be worth it in the long run. You also really need to ensure that your content in the community is relevant and accurate and up to date. And so in a past life, I used to call this curating, but going in there, if there's, questions or conversations that are just like out of date or don't make sense anymore, or they're really just too transactional for the community, meaning it was like, Crystal went and asked the question and someone else answered it and the question is only related to Crystal's situation, it's not going to help anyone else, get rid of it. There's ways to archive it, to move it out of the limelight so that it's not kind of muddying up the rest of the community for everyone else. Same thing, if you have product announcements that are out of date or FAQ articles or anything that could potentially confuse someone, by having that content out there, you're just kind of like taking 2 steps back for yourself because it's not helping with the self-service or even the peer-to-peer support nature of the community because you're going to have to come in and answer any outstanding questions. So the other thing is too, when you're working with your advocates as well, if you notice that you have like an advocate or champion that's super passionate and is really excited, but they keep giving the wrong information, tell them. Because again, it will create more work for you if you don't tell them and you have to go in and like clean up their messes behind them. Whereas if you reach out to them personally and have a phone call and say like, I'm so excited by your enthusiasm, I really want to grow this relationship with you. Hey, I have some tips for you and I have some insider information that you might be interested in. And then you can layer some of the training tips in with some new information about the product they might not already know. The champion or user will be really, really excited about that, and then it'll help make your life easier in the future. And then finally, your community will thrive if you get really, really good at driving internal resolution to ongoing issues. So whether it's a long-term bug that your product team or whatever says that they're not going to fix. Or maybe it's like this feature request that every single user wants and it's got 1 million votes and people just won't shut up about it. If you can somehow like push that along and use your internal political savvy to make things right on behalf of the user, like it just does really amazing things for your community. Like the customers feel, for one, that they've like been listened to. You know, we all say like, oh, make sure you acknowledge them and say thank you. Well, if you're a regular member in a community and you're participating a lot, saying like, oh, thanks, I'm going to share your product information, it's only going to go so far, right? You actually at some point need to see some sort of action. That doesn't mean you got to implement everything they say or fix every bug they're crying about, but give or take. So, you know, use your skills, use your gut, and fight the battles that you want to fight on behalf of your users. I think that one thing that I personally have been really proud of, like myself, is that I will always go to battle on behalf of our users, basically. Like there's not sort of, if it's something that I really believe in and it's a feature that's really, really important that's going to help improve their workflow or, you know, make things better, or for instance, maybe this feature somehow ties back into whatever our corporate goals are, then yeah, it's absolutely worth the extra meetings. It's absolutely worth the extra time and effort that you put into gathering data and putting together the decks and getting people together to talk about what you're doing. So those are all the ways that you can make your support communities thrive. There's a lot of other ways you can do it too. But it just goes to show that you can be a community manager for a support community without being the person who has to have all the answers and who has to be up late every single night responding to people or be the first person responding on the weekends. And then finally, above all else, we need to have fun with what we're doing. I'd like to go run in a meadow today. That would be nice. You know, regardless of what our job descriptions say or what the company's definition is, you know, at the end of the day, if you're having fun and are excited about what you're doing and you're connected to your users, then you can find a way to make it work. Like all of those conversations that you can have internally to, you know, fix little things will completely be worth it. But if you're coming to work every day and you're not having fun and you can't get excited about your users or about the product, then that's a really good personal indicator that you want to listen to and decide if you need to, you know, look for something else or even look and see if community management is right for you too. Sometimes it can be a job that you stumble into that just doesn't end up being like a right fit. But if I found the job to be personally like incredibly rewarding, especially working from the support side of things, and I've actually found it to be a lot of fun. I love the relationships that I've built with some of my community members. Last year for Community Manager Appreciation Day, we sent some of the community manager members in my old community. We actually like went on Amazon and like ordered them little things that, you know, we thought that they would be interested in. You know, like went to this one girl's Twitter account, found out that she loved tea and a bunch of other things, and we found a little like tea sample kit on Amazon and just had it sent directly to her and made sure it got there on time. And so things like that. So doing that little thing, like sending out the handwritten notes, like that just is, it brings a lot of joy to my day. So you want to make sure that you are above all just enjoying what it is that you're doing. And with that said, that's what I've got for you guys tonight. So any questions, any thoughts? Did you like it? Was it crap? Let me hear it. Regina. Oh, thank you. Oh, I'll repeat it. Oh, I'll repeat, or if you want to. Oh, okay.
Well, just a question, because you were talking about engaging those really enthusiastic people, and that's great, but what about the dark side of that? Like example where I am right now, will not say, but really enthusiastic, you know, like customers have been engaged, and then there's like a secret Facebook page, and if anyone's going to say, or manage one of those, you know how awful that can be. But no buy-on from like the management to change it, you know, so you kind of get stuck with these really enthusiastic people that are kind of making community actually a little bit more complex.
Okay. That's a great question. So to paraphrase and to say this louder for everyone else, the question was, we talk a lot about engaging users and advocates, but what about the dark side of that? When it can get a little bit out of hand, or when you know, the resources that you thought you had might not be there, and these users, albeit very passionate, are making things a lot more complicated and a lot more frustrating than they actually need to be. I've always found that when I'm having trouble with a particular user, that and especially if it's someone who's been like a power user. And so my last community, we had this guy who had been on our platform since 2006. So he's a longtime member of the community, and we pushed out a new change to our platform, and he just was livid about it. Like, wrote in seriously this post that was probably about 2 feet long, and just ripping everything to shreds. And so, that was really frustrating. It made things really, really complicated, because obviously something like that gets attention from a lot of other people, and you might not necessarily want it to. And I think that, the best way to go is we're all human, right? So if you can get that person on the phone in any way, shape, or form, like get it out of email or a community post, but actually get it to a place where they can like hear your voice and hear what you have to say, I think does a lot to diffuse a lot of the tension. I know that's not always scalable when you have a huge group of, like super users like this, but maybe in that case you could do like a GoToMeeting sort of webinar thing where you only invite them to join, and you can address their concerns. There's a way in those types of software where you can set it up and like take questions and that sort of thing. But when people become really antagonistic, they forget, because they're online, you can be hiding behind like a pseudonym, or really it's just like you're typing something, so it's a lot easier to be much more nasty than you have to be. And so if there's a way to bring like the human element back into it and just say like, whoa, like let's take a step back here. Let me tell you where I'm coming from. Like, let me hear where you're coming from. Then there's usually a way to like work it out amicably. So does that help? Kind of, maybe not. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Yes.
So I am a part of a company that makes an amazing product. It's one of the best on the market for what it does. Yet our user base, our main clientele, like 90%, and that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not, use it for something that we cannot acknowledge, that we can say we embrace and talk about, foster discussion. To tie it into your past experience with Apple, let's say somebody, or obviously it's happened, there's forum posts out there about jailbreaking the iPhone. That's why a lot of people like it. But you can't touch it. How do you engage and foster that?
That's a tough one. So the question was, if you are managing a community for a product where a very significant majority of the users are using the product in a way that the company itself cannot acknowledge or condone in any way, shape, or form. And the example was, if you're working at Apple and people are asking you questions about how to jailbreak their iPhone, you're not allowed to engage with that, and you don't really want to. That was a really great question. I've not ever had experience with something like that. And so if anyone else has had experience and wants to jump in and share, please feel free. But I think my sort of like gut, I think from like the platform management side, if you have a platform, like if you're using something like Lithium or Get Satisfaction, or if you have a private Facebook group or whatever, I would really make sure that your like moderation guides and things are very, very clear about what you can and can't talk about and what is like really like not appropriate. And then you just have to be like very consistent about removing that kind of content, and maybe just starting discussions around things that you want people to talk about. If you do have any users that aren't in that group, the 90% that are talking about the things you don't want them to, if you can reach out to them and encourage or incent them to come in and start different discussions, but almost sort of like, you don't ever want to reward bad behavior by paying more attention to it. It's like the whole don't feed the trolls thing. Consistent moderation to like remove that kind of content as quickly as possible, and also like let the users know like why it's being removed, and then just try and really put an effort on bringing in more conversations around the things that you want to talk about would probably be like the primary approach that I would take. It's really hard, especially when you're building platforms, because you love to see how platforms evolve and how users will take your product and do really, really cool things with it. And in some cases, if you do ever have to get to the point where a user, is mad at you for removing their content, you could easily just reach out to them and say like, look, violates all these terms of services. I think you're a great person. I literally cannot have that on my website for legal reasons. And so, that's why, is there any way we can come to an understanding on it? But yeah. Oh my God, now we have 3. Okay, 5. We're going to start with you, and then you, and then you, and then in the middle. Does that sound good? Okay, great.
So we work together.
Oh, fantastic.
So how do you kind of continue to foster this organic community feel when a lot of what you're doing is moderating and there is some censorship because of legal reasons or terms of service reasons? So, you have to develop these processes and procedures that kind of dictate what you can and can't say, but at the same time, you're really trying to foster this community. So how do you manage both of those?
So the question was, you want to foster a really organic and authentic and engaging community, but at the same time, you have to be really, strict on the moderation side of it and making sure that you don't have any content out there that could potentially put your company at risk. And how do you balance that? And I think really how you would balance that is engaging with the users that are doing right and find ways to encourage them to bring that in, because as long as you're not creating fake accounts and going in and starting discussions saying that your name is Sally when you're really not, then I think it's still part of authentic community building. You're just giving people a little bit more of an extra nudge. Or if you're taking a conversation that already exists from another user, maybe it doesn't have any responses yet, and a couple other users would be good to respond to it, emailing it to them directly. I would really, really appreciate it if you could take some time, that sort of thing, and just, again, focus, I guess, on the relationship building with the people that are doing the good things. And then in terms of the content, so you would have to take it down on any property that you sort of own, right? So whether it's your own community platform or blog comments or a Facebook page. But if it's existing somewhere where it's something that you don't own, like Twitter or Facebook or whatever, I would probably, again, just sort of ignore it until it gets to the point where if you were to have to serve a cease and desist, that would really suck. But that could be something that you might have to do, and in that case, you'd want to work with your legal team about it. But I think just I don't know, I'm a big believer, kill them with kindness, do all the, talk to the people that are doing the good things, focus on the bright spots. There's this book, Switch, by Chip and Dan Heath, that is one of my favorite business books ever. And they have this really great section all about focusing on the bright spots and the things that are working, and that slowly will kind of take root and take shape. So I don't know if that helps. Yeah, go ahead, please. Live streamers can hear. Sorry.
Maybe not, but yeah. So I dealt with a community manager who was based in EMEA who had their platform was live streaming. Their main audience and main users were using it for porn, something that the company probably didn't want to highlight. Definitely didn't want to highlight. But what they focused on was on the feature sets, and that's what they asked their communities to talk about. So that, like Katie said, nudge them in the direction in which highlights what your product is capable of doing, where someone can dream big and take that product and take that platform to wherever they want to take it, as long as it's legal. Then you should be fine in that sense. So hopefully that sheds a little bit more light.
That's a really interesting idea. Thank you so much. I like that one. That's good. Question, or do you have a follow-up comment? Oh, okay.
I work at a nonprofit. We have a free product online. It's about 10 million users a month, and we have no support team. And so I'm sort of trying to scale up a group of volunteers to do all the sort of bugs and ticket tracking. Is that a dumb idea, or is there a reason to sort of advocate for some hiring a support person or two?
Well, no, I don't think it's a dumb idea. So the question was, I work at a nonprofit, and we have a free product with 10 million users, and we're trying to figure out how to scale our support and handle bugs and issues and that sort of thing. And so the question is sort of like, would you advocate for hiring a support rep, or focus on the peer-to-peer and the user advocate? And I would say it kind of will depend on, I think, what you can afford, really. It is nice to have a technical support rep on your side that totally understands the product inside and out and can at least point you in the direction of what that like is officially how it's supposed to be working or how it's not supposed to be working. But if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. And then in that case, the community platforms do make a lot of sense. I would say, again, really engage the people and like the volunteers who are willing to like put all this stuff together and like to track things and to track issues. And then also just be really clear in like your documentation that like, because this is a free product, we rely on peer-to-peer support. You might be able to do some sort of a ticketing integration to where if a user wants to report a specific bug, that can just like funnel straight into like a queue that someone on your side reviews and decides if it needs to go to like engineering or not. But just I think most people really understand if you're transparent with them about like the resources and you say like, look, nonprofit, I'm offering you something for free. Most people get it that it's like, yeah, you're not going to be offering like 24/7 phone support. Mozilla Thunderbird actually did a really good job with this, doing their peer-to-peer support in a community, and they had a whole bunch of volunteers where they just gave them advanced kind of like moderation stuff, and they had certain guys assigned to searching for like certain words. So like one guy would come in and just like search for the word crash everywhere, and then that's the issues that he would handle. Another person would come in and search for like a particular it was like a particular feature name or something like that, and then he would handle like that sort of things, and then they were just responsible with liaising with the team that actually worked for it. So I kind of, it could go either way, but if you do go the peer-to-peer way, which is great, a lot of free services do that. Just be really clear in setting expectations with your users about when they can and can't expect to get responses. Great. Yeah, did you have a question in the back? Yeah, so the question was, when you're scaling and expanding, do you have any case studies or like metrics or maybe like benchmarks that you're looking for? When to hire new people, that sort of thing. Yeah, as a general rule of thumb. It's interesting because certain companies put out certain stats. Like I heard one stat that like a moderator working a 20-hour week could manage something like 1,600 posts. I'm like, are they not reading? Are they literally just like going through like a spam filter and like checking things off? And I mean, if any of you were at ForumCon, Justin Isaf, who worked and led community at the Huffington Post, he would handle like 500,000 comments a week or something ridiculous like that. I wasn't at the conference. I just read the tweet streams and was like, oh my God. So, I mean, yeah, in terms of scaling it kind of depends on what you're expecting that person to do. If they literally are just a moderator where you're kind of like, ban hammer, this is violating, this isn't violating, and it's very, like, almost like little to no user interaction, you can probably get away, like, they can probably handle a higher volume. They could be doing that. I've never done that myself. The platforms that I'm familiar with are Get Satisfaction and Lithium, and then, I mean, Facebook just from like a personal use and a personal page. So depending on what information that you can pull out of there, I know that Get Satisfaction has a moderation tool on the back end where it basically organizes all your community content into a queue, and then you can set filters based off of like whether it's a problem or a question or like a keyword search or like a date range, to be able to manage it that way. And Lithium has some other things. But in terms of your question towards benchmarks and like when do you hire, that's a really hard question just to answer. And I think you just have to look at like, what's the type of content that we're receiving? Is it primarily transactional, or is it people who we need to have like more of an ongoing discussion with? And the more that you're going to want to have more of like a deeper discussion interaction with people, the more community managers are going to need, or moderators. Gotcha. Yeah, so I would probably say, I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit more after, but and just like look at your numbers and go from there. Yes. Go ahead. Yeah, awesome yellow scarf. Yeah. So the question was around brand engagement, working for a smaller company, maybe an early stage startup where you're responsible for both community and things on like social media as well as customer support, and where do you draw the line around like what you're doing and how your support efforts are translating into positive brand engagement and that sort of thing. Is that right? Did I capture it? Okay. So to start off with that question, I would say you really kind of have to go back and focus on like what is your definition of engagement, and really understand like what do you want that to look like. Like literally, do you want retweets? Do you want Facebook shares? Like, do you want people doing like blog posts or interviews about you? Are you trying to get picked up in like tech blogs or whatever? But you got to figure out exactly what you consider engagement to be. And I've even seen some companies, they will take, because there's a lot of different ways that someone can engage with you online, and they'll give like a rating scale to it. Like, okay, if we get a favorite on Twitter, it's like 1 point. But if we get someone to like share and add a comment with it on Facebook, it's something else. So there's also this sort of like scaling effort. In terms of how it ties in to customer support, I mean, I definitely see customer support and brand engagement as two like completely separate things. But if you're looking to drive more brand engagement as a result of your customer support efforts, I think it's perfectly fine to ask people, oh, did you have a great experience today? Tweet and tell us about it. Tell your friends about it. Oh, did you have an awesome, like go rate us on the App Store or whatever it is. I think it's perfectly fine to do that. Alongside of that, you might want to consider doing some sort of survey that could be, could be like a customer satisfaction or an NPS survey where they can give you like additional like commentary and feedback, and you could just work that into your, engagement definitions of, okay, like it's like private feedback, but it was really good, and so maybe it gets like a different point here or there. But I think it's a complex question, and you'd probably really just have to start with like what engagement means to you and like what you want it to be. Thank you. All right, we have time for one more question. Yeah, and then you should go take shots of tequila. Just kidding. Yes.
So in this scenario where your company rolls out a new release and then you have a lot of feedback that's perhaps predominantly negative,
Mm-hmm.
why do you do this, it's fun before it's like, what criteria do you use to sort of make the decision as to, is this something that I need to raise alarm bells about and talk to product managers and tell them that the release has problems, or do I figure out how do I figure out, are these just a few people who are going to complain about everything versus do I have a more general problem? And also, how do you determine how you're going to respond to that, like following up with people individually versus maybe making some sort of moderated comment?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question was, great question by the way, thank you. You roll out a product release and it's, people are complaining about it, they have a lot of issues. How do you know when to escalate that to product and decide if it's something that you need to actually do something about, or how do you determine whether or not these other people are just going to complain because people hate change and that happens? And then also, how do you decide how to respond back? So with this particular guy, because he had been such a long-term member of our community and because he had just had like a laundry list of complaints, I actually escalated it directly to product and just gave him the background on who he was, like where else he'd participated in, like all of his history with us, any background information. And myself and the product manager, we actually sat down line by line, and product likes to ship a lot of things as like MVP or like we'll iterate or fix it later, that sort of thing. And so a lot of the complaints that had come in, he actually already had on his radar to fix in sort of like an upcoming release. They just weren't considered like showstoppers for this one. Like, okay, maybe like the formatting is off here, like the button isn't shaded the way we want it to be, that sort of thing. And so that was good there that he already recognized it. But for feedback that we were completely caught off guard by, we actually went in and did testing ourselves and just like, put myself in the user shoe, like how does this work and how is it, making my life easier or making my life harder? I think it is really important to understand the context that your users are coming from, because people who are power users of your application are going to have a completely different set of needs than the people who are just your general kind of like maybe day-to-day or like once a week users, like people who aren't really going to notice anything. And so if you can understand that context, that will kind of help you determine like the severity of the issue. And then if you yourself can reproduce it and see like, oh yeah, if I was doing his job, I would be really angry too, then you probably would want to push those along more so than like, okay, the button shading is off, we'll get there. And then in terms of how to respond to them, I think that as much as you can, it's best to respond to the channel that they reach out to you in. So if they post something publicly on like your wall or in your community platform, respond there, at least acknowledging it. And if you have to follow up with something more personal, like maybe the guy is really angry and you have to talk him off a ledge, I've actually always just, even in my post offered and said like, would you be willing to have a phone call with me? Like if so, let me know. I'll send you an email and we can set it up. I really want to get to the bottom of this and be super empathetic. But I think for the most part, it's best to kind of stick with the channel they reach out to you in. And then, also when things are addressed, make sure to tell them, because then you're like, hey, guess what? I fixed this just for you. And it got fixed faster just because of you. So great. All right. So thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed it. And here's Susan.
I just wanted to say that July we'll have a speaker from Adobe. I would remember who it was, but Lewis left and I can't remember her name. But we are having a speaker from Adobe, and in August we're having Baby Center. And I'm waving over there at the Baby Center folks, who are Vivian and what's her name? Sorry. Oh, it's not her. Okay. Well, Vivian's colleague and Vivian are going to speak from Baby Center about the Baby Center community, which is enormous. And so thank you guys. Hang out for a little bit. And by 9 o'clock, everyone should be out. So drink some tequila and enjoy yourselves. And see you guys next time. Thanks.